Welcome back to Reason and Theology, everyone. Your host, Michael. We are continuing here with Louis Dizon with our series on the basics of biblical Hebrew. Welcome back, Louis. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right. It's been very busy. We got a
Mm.
few other things lined up besides this. Actually, I, we were just talking about a thing that we're going to do tomorrow. You might remember that we had Khalil and Danny a few times in the past to do like some Islam related stuff. Well, we're going to
Yeah.
have him back on tomorrow, and that's going to be
Ooh.
fun.
Yeah, I look forward to that. That's going to be interesting hearing also you weigh in on it. So I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like it when we delve into other religions like Judaism and Islam. It diversifies the content on our channel.
That's true, and you know a whole lot more about Islam than I do. So it's I always prefer to just hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, fair, fair. I also appreciate
Islam than I do. So it's
when we're doing these Hebrew lessons because this is another niche that not a lot of Catholic channels tend to cover. So um, it also helps to diversify the content. Now, I
I
was
like
going
that you
to
were able to add their Louis Dizon in Hebrew to the StreamYard
yes.
title. That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. So I actually use a website called Lexilogos to type out text in other scripts such as Hebrew
Hmm.
and Greek.
Yeah,
So for those who are interested, they can I can send a link to that, and people who want to play around with it can use it as well.
that's awesome.
Anywho, I was originally going to start us off with a song just like last time, but I have been informed that playing songs on these channels results in demonetization. So unfortunately, we can't continue doing that. The best that we could do going forward is to just provide links to various songs that I think would be useful for like for these kinds of lessons. So actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about the song that I am going to be referring to. Um, hold on a second. Um, can you? Is my thing working?
Yeah.
So so it shows. It's a song called Ve David, which basically means and David. So this is it's basically a modern adaptation of some verses from the Bible that talk about King David and how he's God's anointed one. And there's this fun refrain in it where it says, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s, which you
Hmm.
might recall is something that
Hmm.
Israelite women were singing
Hmm.
um, during after he slayed Goliath. So and then the lyrics are in both the original Hebrew here, so you can see the text here, as well as an English translation, so you can figure out what's going on if you're having trouble with translation. So I'm gonna provide a link to that um, in the description, and then hold on, let me switch to Verbum next. So now I'm gonna switch to the lesson for the day. One thing I'm gonna also start doing a little bit more often is referring to this other resource. So we've been using the Lexham Biblical Hebrew Grammar by Carl Kurtz and Rebecca Josberger. Um, but I occasionally refer to other resources in doing these, and one of the resources that I will be referring to is called a Hebrew Bible Insert: Student's Guide to the Syntax of Biblical Hebrew. Hebrew syntax is generally considered sort of like an intermediate level topic. So usually this is material that doesn't get covered until someone starts doing like second year Hebrew. But I think it'd be good to like dip into it here and there just to explain some of the grammatical concepts in more depth. And the thing I like about it is that first of all, it's actually available for free on academia.edu. So if you look around over there, you'll find a free copy of it floating around. And the other thing is that it's fairly short. A lot of Hebrew syntax books tend to be very thick and detailed, but this one is simple and just gives you the basics. And I'll be using it to provide examples of some of the grammatical concepts that I'll be referring to in this lesson. So, that being said, I am going to move on with the grammar lesson. Just a quick recap. In our previous lessons, we started talking about different forms of the kal stem or the kal binyan, and we've covered both the indicative forms, the perfect and the imperfect, as well as the volitionals, which includes the jussive, the cohortative, and the imperative. These are all examples of what you'd call the finite verbs. So they're finite in the sense that they are time bound. They refer to a verb occurring at a specific form in point in time. The contrast to that would be the non-finite verbs, and there are two specifically. There are participles and there are adjectives. Um, and the other thing about these two, besides the fact that they're non-finite, which means they don't fit into a specific point in time, is that their functions also overlap with adjectives and verbs. So part of the function of a participle can overlap with an adjective or an adverb, and then an infinitive sometimes functions in as a noun, and you'll see what I mean by that. Um, if you're wondering, in English, these are um, verbal forms that we would usually add the letters ing to. Um, so a good example of an infinitive, for example, would be in Star Trek, the opening line where it says boldly going where no man has gone before. So going there is an infinitival form of the word go. An alternate way of rendering it would be adding the word to before it. So instead of going, you could say to go. Um, so, um, Also, one of the things that's unique about Hebrew is that the infinitive comes in two different forms. You have the infinitive construct and the infinitive absolute. Um, and I'm going to explain what those terms mean as we go along. So let's start with the participle. So it's an ing verbal adjective. Um, so when we say that something is walking or you know the word walking there is being used in participial sense. um, so because the participle is a verbal adjective, it tends to have three different uses that correspond to the three uses of an adjective. So if you recall, we did adjectives so many lessons ago, and I mentioned the fact that adjectives come in three forms. You got the attributive, the predicative, and the substantive. So use it in if you want to see examples of that, an attributive adjective would be like saying the good king. A predicative adjective would be like saying the king is good, and then uh, a substantive use of the adjective would be like saying the good or the good one. Now, participles, because they function adjectively, are somewhat similar. So you can substitute the word good here with, say, a verb such as walking. So you can say an an attributive uh, participle would be something like the walking king. A predicative use of a participle would be something like the king is walking, whereas a substantival use of it would be um, the walking one. So here it's explained here in the textbook. Participle describes a person, place, or thing by what it is doing. So think of a Hebrew participle as an ing verbal description. Um, so the base form of it would be a something ing one, a verbing one. Um, and when you translate into English, it can be a little bit, it can be a little bit complicated to translate it because sometimes you can translate a participle as if it was a noun. So, for example, take the verb shomer. It comes from the verb shamar, which means to guard. But so a shomer is a guarding one, but you can simply render it by the noun form guard. Um, and because it's an adjectival verb or verbal adjective, it can sometimes be translated as if it were an adjective. So let's look at the three uses of a participle. So first you have the attributive use. So if we want to say the walking king in Hebrew it would be hamelech haholech. So when you're using a participle adjectively, note that the participle can take a definite article, ha. So we don't normally do that with finite verbs, but we can with participles. So hamelech haholech, the walking king. Now, if we want to say a walking king, we just take out the definite article and say melech holech. Um, the important thing to note with attributives is that they always agree with what they are um, modifying in gender, noun, number, and definiteness. So, you know, so if this is masculine and singular and definite, then the participle attached to it must also be masculine, singular, and definite. If it was feminine, we would use the feminine form uh, of the attributive predicate, or the attributive form of the participle rather. So let's say the walking queen. It would be hamalka holcha, or hamalcha holechet. Or we want to say the walking kings, we would say hamlachim haholchim. And there, I give you a little sense of what the different forms of the attributive are when we conjugate them for gender and number. Basically, it's the same as with nouns and adjectives. You get an a ending for the feminine, an im ending for plural masculine, and an ot ending for feminine plural. So uh, the walking queens would be hamlachot, haholchot. Um, One of the things that you should note, however, is that um, with participles, the feminine singular form has two forms. So you have the standard holcha, but then there's also holechet, which is like you're taking the standard feminine masculine singular form and you're adding et to it. That's segol and a tav. Um, and then you have the predicate use of an adjective. So here, the difference the between the attributive use of the participle is that the the participle does not need to agree with the noun that it's modifying in terms of definiteness. So the example given here, hamelech holech. Notice that the word melech has the definite article in it, but the word holech does not. Basically, this means the king is walking. Or if you want it to be hyperliteral, the king is a walking one. By the way, just as an aside, if you're learning modern Hebrew, the participle also becomes the simple past tense. So if I said hamelech holech, um, if this was modern Hebrew, you could also render this as the king walks. So the attributive form, the attributive use of the participle basically will correspond to um, the simple past tense in that sense. There's places in biblical Hebrew where it works functions like that as well, but um, it's not as prevalent as in modern Hebrew. So still, most of the time, if you see holech here, you would translate that as walking rather than walks. Um, and just like so, just like with its adjectival form, this can be used with a pronoun instead of a noun. So atem holchim, you are walking. Or another one is hineni holchim. And then you have the substantival participle. Um, so if you recall, a substantive is basically an adjective that takes the place of a noun. So if you want to say, if I said tovim, that means the good. I mean, literally, it would be the goods, but you would translate that more idiomatically as the good ones or the good people. So hatovim amru, the good men said. Now substitute tov with holech once again, or the plural form holchim. We say haholchim amru. That means the good men or the good ones are saying, or sorry, the good ones said. Um, and the substantival form is the one where, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes you can simply translate it as a noun. So hashomrim amru. So shomer, or in its plural form, shomrim, means guarding one or guarding ones. But you can just say the guards said. Of course, you could also do the same thing with these others, but then it would sound weird. So you could say Haholchim Amru would be the walkers said, um, but it sounds at that point like you're referring to zombies rather than men that are walking. So we would prefer not to translate it that way. Um, Now let's look at. It's a good place to look at some of the examples given in the Hebrew Bible insert. So I mentioned that this is one of the resources that I sometimes consult when I'm preparing these lessons, but I usually don't show it on the screen. Today, I'm gonna start showing it to show you some of the other examples. Um, so attributive participles. One of the things that is notable about it is that sometimes it also functions as a relative clause. So a relative clause, you might recall, is a clause that begins with who, what, that, or which. So here are a couple of examples of um, attributive participles that function as part of a relative clause. Uh, in and these are all examples that are actually found in the Hebrew Bible, by the way. So Ruth chapter 2 verse 6, Hanahar hanitzav al hakotzrim. So it's the young man, the one who was stationed upon or over the ones reaping. So actually notice that this is also a participle, kotzrim, from the verb katsar, to reap. So the reaping ones, or as it's translated here, the reapers. So this entire phrase, hanitzav al hakotzrim, is basically functioning as a relative clause which modifies hana'ar. You may recall that sometimes in Hebrew, the relative clause is also introduced by the particle asher, but that is not always the case. And here we see that asher is not used. Um, Another example would be Jeremiah 27, verse 3. Mal'akim habaim Yerushalayim. The messengers the ones that are coming to Jerusalem. The word to is not in the text, but it's implied. So once again, Habaim Yerushalayim is modifying Malakim, so it functions as a relative clause. And you see here um, uh, the uh, the word Ba'im from the verb Ba'a, so that is modifying Malakim. Now let's look at some predicate participles. So usually they're indefinite. There are times when it can become definite, but most of the time they're indefinite. And syntactically, we usually put them before the noun or the pronoun that they are modifying. Um, and it states in the Hebrew Bible insert, they function much like finite verbs. So even though they are not finite, they can take on a finite aspect. And the context may indicate an ongoing or iterative sense. That means it's something that the subject is still in the process of doing. So here's some examples. Um, Here, these ones are interesting because the both verses that we're about to look at have two participles apiece. Genesis 37:16, Mavakesh Vayomer et achai anochi hagidanali efohem roim. So he said, I am seeking. So Mavakesh is a PL participle actually. So we've only discussed call participles or call verbs in general up to this point. Here you're getting a sneak peek at what the PL form of the participle looks like. So Mavakesh comes from bakash, which means to seek. So the PL form, you see that it has a mem with a shva before it. And like all other PLs, the second radical has a dagesh here on the kof. So Mavakesh, and he said to, I'm seeking, actually, and he said, I am seeking my brothers. Tell me, where are they pasturing? So Roim is another participle that's being used in um, in a predicate sense from ra'ah to pasture. And another example will be in Psalms 37:32. Tofer rasha latzadik umevakesh lahamito. The wicked plots against the righteous. So tofe is the plot to plot, plotting. The wicked one is plotting towards the righteous one. So la sometimes has the connotation of against, and it does in this case. And again, that same PL participle form of Bakesh shows up again, and he is seeking to Hamito, so to put him to death. This is the Hefil form of the word to put to death or mot, or to kill, basically. We'll discuss Hefils at another time. And then the substantives. These are interesting to look at. Vayir u. Hashomrim ish yotze min ha'ir. That's in Judges 124. And they saw the guards, or the guarding ones. Sorry, the guarding ones saw, the guards saw a man going out, yotze. This is actually also a participle, but it is a participle functioning as an attributive. So ish yotze, a leaving man. So the guarding one saw a leaving man from the city. You can see if we translated Hebrew literally, it tends to sound rather stilted and awkward. So if you wanted to translate this in a way that makes sense in English, you would say, and the guard saw a man leaving from the city. And another example, Otem azno mizaakat dal, the one closing his ear from the cry of the poor. That's in Proverbs 21:13. So Otem, the closing one. the one closing. So saying the otem asno, the one who closes his ear. Um, and then the other notable thing about participles is that you can sometimes add, um, depending on the context, you could add objects to them. So you can actually add a pronominal suffix to them. So a good example of that is Exodus 15:26. Ki ani Adonai rofecha, for I, Adonai, am your healer, or the one who heals you, or the healing one of you, if you want it to be sound stilted. So those are all the different ways that a participle could be used, um, and you can see that there are many different ways to translate a participle in English. Uh, the general rule of thumb is um, try to render it in a way that sounds natural in English. Um, if you want to make it super literal, you could be the watching one, or the guarding one, or the closing one, but that would you know, but that would be awkward. There's no one right way to do it. When you're translating, make sure just to choose one that is understandable. Moving on, we go to the infinitives. So, as it says here, Hebrew infinitives are another verbal hybrid that we understood as ing words. So, it's not always ing. It could also be, you can also put the word to before it, and would function. It would also indicate an infinitive. And there's also times when infinitives um, indic- can start with can have a preposition before it, in which case it would indicate um, like a certain point in time, but we'll discuss that later. So infinitives are basically come in two forms: infinitive construct and infinitive absolute. And unlike all the other forms that we've seen thus far, infinitives do not conjugate for gender or number or person. Um, they're only either construct or adjective, or absolute rather. So, what are infinitive constructs and absolutes? Let's take a look. So, an infinitive construct, which is the most common form of the infinitive that you'll run into, is a verbal noun that's linked to other words in a sentence, hence why we call it a construct. Remember, we talked about construct forms. So it's like x of y. That's the broadest definition of what a construct is. Often it's used to indicate possession, but not always. It could also indicate that one is modifying the other. Um, so, but when we're looking at an infinitive construct, it is translated a little bit differently. So we can look at a few examples. So the uh, the infinitive construct could be attached to a noun. So the example given here is shot ish. Um, the literal translation of that would be the judging of a man. Now, the way Hebrew works, this could either mean that the man is the one who is judging, or it could be the man is the one being judged. So infinitives joined to a noun can sometimes be ambiguous in that sense, and you kind of have to look at the context of in which the phrase is used to determine which is in view. Um, you can also attach a pronoun suffix to an infinitive construct. So the rule is very similar to the first example we just gave. So here the example given is shvotchem. Um, so you're judging, or the judging of you. Now, your judging in that context, once again, is ambiguous. It could mean that you are the one judging, or it could be that you are the one being judged. And you have to look at the context to figure out which one the author has in mind. Um, Now, we can also add prepositions to infinitive constructs, and the different kinds of prepositions that are attached indicate different things. So one of the most common prepositions that are attached to an infinitive construct would be le, and when le is attached to it, it's used to express purpose. So the lamed usually has a hirek on it, as you can see here. So lishfot, it means to judge. So we could say God came down in order to judge, or God came down for judging. That would be God. It'd be God came down lishfot here. Besides the la, you can also use b and k. Now, when you see uh, these two, these are usually used to indicate a specific point in time. So these are periodizing uses of the preposition, or the infinitive, with rather. So the example given here would be Bishmot Shmuel. Literally, would be it'll be in the judging of Samuel, but you would translate that more along the lines of when Samuel judged. Um, and similarly, Kishmot Shmuel would mean the same thing. Um, Clauses, like sentences that have this form, usually begin with some form of vaihi or vahaya. Um, these are the vaiktol and vakatal forms, respectively, of the verb haya, to be. So vaihi kishmot shmuel means and so it was, when Samuel judged. Um, is referring back to a certain period of time in the past. Conversely, v'haya kishmot shmuel, and so it will be when Samuel judges. So here, another period is in view, but that period is in the future. Um, so a little something note here. When Hebrew uses haya to establish temporal reference for infinitive construct, the larger sentence structure can feel awkward to translate. Um, So Vayhi Kishmot Hamelech. So it was, um, when the king heard, or and so when the king uh, and the king tore his garments. So in context like this, um, you could simplify the translation. So instead of just saying "and happened when the king heard that he tore his garments," you can say "when the king heard, he tore his garments." Right? Sometimes it helps to just simplify your translation, take out some of the extra verbiage to make it flow more smoothly. Um, so those are all the different forms of the infinitive construct. We can take a look at some other examples of the infinitive construct in the Hebrew Bible insert. Number 16, verse 31, for example, it says, Vayhi ke kaloto ledaber et kol hadvarim ha'ele. So here we get a two-in-one. These are both infinitive constructs, but they both have prepositions attached to them. And so it was, when he finished speaking, when he finished to speak all of these words. So when he finished, remember adding a k after the infinitive means when. So this from kala, to finish, and this from diber, which is means to speak. It's a pl. You can tell from the dagesh on the second radical, on our second root. And then another example, Genesis 25:26. Vayitzchak ben shishim shana beledet otam. And Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. We know there's a she, not just because the verb is to bear or to give birth, but also because the form, actually, no, never mind. Because of her bearing, basically. We know that it's a she, She because it's because the noun is to bear, basically. In her bearing, he was 60 years old in her bearing of them, rather. Um, Now, the infinitive has a number of other uses, so it can be complementary, telic, or gerundive. A gerund, you might know if you know your English grammar, is basically a verbal noun in the strictest sense. That's the form in which we add the word to before it. And here's some examples. In Joshua 3:7, Hayom hazeh achel gedelcha. Today I am beginning to exalt you. Achel is I am beginning. Gedelcha from gadal means to exalt, and ka to indicate you. And then Numbers 22:13, Me'en Adonai letiti lehaloch imachem. Adonai has refused to allow me to go with you. So to allow me, latiti, um, and then lahaloch, to go with you. So lahaloch imachem is to go with you. And then some more examples. Um, Vatelek lidrosh et Adonai, and she went in order to ask Adonai. Darash literally means to seek, but it can also mean to ask, which is how it's being used in this context. Um, and then there's a lot more examples here. Won't go through all of them. Uh, Infinitive absolutes, another form of the verb of the infinitive. Unlike the infinitive construct, it will never be linked to other words, so it stands on its own. Um, and there are a number of usages for it. Uh, Usually, it's used to modify a verb, and sometimes it can stand in a place of a regular verb or noun. So we'll look at some of those usage. Highlighting a main verb, that's the most common way this is being used. So there are a number of reasons why an infinitive might be added to modify a verb. It could be to add emphasis. So Genesis 31:30 has the example haloch, halachta. Um, Literally, you would say walking, you walked. But if you want to translate it idiomatically, it would mean you have certainly walked, or you've certainly gone, because you have longed for your father's house. So the adding of the infinitive here um, has the connotation of surely. Um, and One of the most common forms of this that I can think of, which occurs all over the Pentateuch, is the form Mottamut or Mottamut, um, which literally means dying, you will die. But in English translation, we would translate that as you will certainly die. So whenever you see someone will surely die, that is the form that is behind it in the Hebrew. It can also be used to indicate progressive or continual action. So Genesis 26:13, haloch v'gadal, vayigdal ha'ish vayelech haloch v'gadel. So the man became great, and he went growing and growing. But going and growing there could be better translated as he continued to increase until he became very great. So he continued to gadal. Um, Remember that gadal means to become great. Um, and in the other use of this to indicate manner, so Genesis 4:37 has Sha'ol Sha'al. That means literally it would be asking. He asked. Um, Idiomatically, that would be he asked carefully. Um, Besides modifying a verb, it could actually stand on its own as a regular verb. This is a relatively uncommon use of it. And if you recall in the previous lesson, we actually run into one of this. So if you remember, we were looking at the Ten Commandments, and we noted that at least one of the Ten Commandments begins with an infinitive. So let's look back again at um, Exodus. So verse 8, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat L'Kodsho. So Zachor here is an infinitive absolute. You would expect an imperative form here normally, so it'd be Zachor, but the imperative is interestingly not used. Instead, we have the infinitive absolute being used in an imperative use here. Notice also that the infinitive construct occurs here, L'Kodsho, to keep it holy, in other words, which is a PL. Um, so that is not a common use, but it does exist. And it's good to know that it is out there, so that if you do run into it, you're not caught off guard. And finally, you can see how it can be used as a noun. So in Isaiah 1:17, we see one example of it. Limdo hetev lid dirshu. So here the mishpat. Let me see. Where's the yeah? So hetev is actually the infinitive absolute here, and it's in a he fill form. So that's another one of those binyanim that we haven't run into yet. Learn to do good. If you wanted to translate it literally, it'd be something along the lines of learn good doing. Um, so it's like doing good is thought of as an abstract noun in this sense, but here it's being used in an absolute imperative. And once again, we can look at a few other examples. The Hebrew Bible insert has a few of them. So the adverbial use. Some examples would be in Deuteronomy 6:17, Shamor tishmerun et mitzot Adonai Elohechem. So keeping, you shall keep the commands of the Lord your God. So instead of keeping, you shall keep, we would say carefully keep, or keep carefully the commands of the Lord your God. Numbers 23:11, it has Lakov oivai lakachticha vehine berachta barech. So I brought you to curse my enemies, and behold, blessing you've blessed. So berach, you blessed to bless. Or if you wanted to translate it idiomatically, it would be you keep on blessing them. And here are some examples. Here's some more examples of the verbal infinitive, the infinitive absolute being used in a verbal sense. So haloch v'rachatzta sheva pa'amim b'yarden. There's a bit of a rainstorm outside. Hopefully that's not messing with the sound quality on my end. But anyway, so it states here, so haloch v'rachatzta, so go and wash. So haloch here is the infinitive absolute, but here it's being used like an imperative. We already covered the Ten Commandments, so we'll skip this one. And then in Isaiah 22, verse 13, we have the word achol ve'shato ki mahar namut. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Here, to eat, or the absolute infinitive, is being used in the sense of a it's being used sort of like a cohortative. So let us, in translation, Hold on just a sec. Unfortunately, we have a bit of a there's a bit of a rainstorm happening over here where I'm at. Hopefully, it's not too it's not affecting the sound quality on my end too badly. Let me just use yeah, actually, okay, it's dying off a little bit. Sorry for the sorry for the uh, slight inconvenience. Um, did not expect bad weather to hit today. I think we actually that may have actually been hail. Come to think of it, yeah, that's definitely hail. Um, hoping that the windows hold. Anyway, we will press on, God willing. So now that we've covered all of the different uses the of the infinitive and the participle, it's let's look at the tables for that. So just like with every verbal form, you have to do some memorization. So in with the using katal as the base form, the participle would be kotel for the masculine singular, kotla or kotelet for the feminine singular. You have kotlim for the masculine plural, and then kotlot for feminine plural. Notice that most of these are the same as the endings you would use for nouns and adjectives, with the exception of kotelet, which is a form that is distinctly participial. Um, and in modern Hebrew, if you're using the participle form as a simple past, you for the feminine singular, you tend to use this form, kotelet. Um, in modern Hebrew, for example, if I say ani ochel lechem, um, you basically say I'm saying I eat bread, or if it's a woman saying it, it would be ani ochelet lechem. Um, and then there's also the passive participle. We didn't really see any examples of it, but the form of it would be katul and katula, katulim and katulot. Um, Notice that in order to identify the passive form, there would be holem, a shurek vav rather, between the second and third consonants. Katul, um, and then there's a kametz, but it shortens in all the other forms. So katul, ktula, ktulim, ktulot. Um, for the shortening, for why it shortens, I would refer back to the rules around vowel shortening that we discussed all the way back in chapter 5. We won't have to worry about that. And then for the infinitives, there's really only two forms. So ktol is the basic form of the infinitive construct, and then katol for the basic form of the infinitive absolute. So notice again, there's a kametz and there's a cholim vav between the second and the third letters for those. So now that we did the grammar portion of this, let's try to do some workbook exercises. Remember that the workbook has practice sheets. This is if you have the workbook, be sure to print out this sheet and do the write out the tables on your own. Writing out the charts is one of the best ways to internalize what they ought to look like. And for the translation, we last left off with Joseph's brothers traveling to Egypt. That's Genesis 42. Next, we're going to do Genesis 43, which is when the brothers return to Egypt with Benjamin. So here are the vocab words that you need to know. Feel free to pause anytime you need to look at these again. So we'll try to cover all of this. We should take the next half hour or so. So verse 1, Vehara'av kaved ba'aretz. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is the right one. V'hara'av kaved ba'aretz. And the famine, ra'av means famine, um, was great in the land. So kaved is a stative adverb. Remember that not all verbs describe action. Some verbs describe states. Um, verse 2, Vayhi ka'asher achlu et kol halechem asher shavru b'mitzrayim vayomer Elohim, sorry, vayomer alehem avihem shuvu shivru lanu ma'at ochel. And so it was, just as they ate um, all of the bread which they bought in Egypt. So, as usual, we will try to parse the verbs as we run into them. Vayhi, we run into it all the time. It's the Vaiktol form of Haya. Achlu, it's a call, perfect, third person masculine plural of achal, to eat. And then shavru, which is the same form for shavar, to buy. And then and he said to them, and their father said to them, um, return, buy for us a little food. So vayomer, a Vaiktal form of amar, to say. So he said, it's third person singular, third, yeah, masculine. And then shuvu, veshivru, shuvu, shivru. These are both imperatives, um, and this is both imperatives of in the masculine plural form. Because you can tell by the addition of the shurek vav at the end. This is from shav, shuv, which means to return, and shavar, to buy. So return, buy. Verse 3, Vayomer elav, Shma elai avi, Amar haish lemor, lo tiru panai ki im achichem itchem. And sorry, Vayomer elav Yehuda lemor. And Judah said to him, saying, so remember, just got introduced to the infinitive. Here is the infinitive construct form of Amar, um, to say, and then Shma Elai, listen to me. So this is the imperative. This is the imperative form of the word Shama, listen or hear. My thought, Amar, the man said, saying. So, this is the basic form of to say, third person singular call. And then limor, it's the infinitive construct once again of to say. Lo tir'u fanai, you'll not see my face if um, if your brother is not with you. So remember, Joseph demanded Benjamin to be with them next time they come. Tir'u here is from Ra'ah. It is the second person imperfect call, singular. Sorry, it's the plural form. You'll see the shurek vav to indicate that it's plural. Verse 4, Navo'a et achinu itanu nevda vanishbara lacha ochel. So they said, let our brother go with us. We will go down and we will buy for you bread. So notice there's a bunch of verbs here. They're all in the first person plural. So navo'a, let. So actually, let um, let our brother go with us. Um, Actually, this form is a little bit confusing because the nun at the end would seem to indicate that it's a first person plural. Um, but the one being asked to go is their brother, which is singular. That might be an e-file. So we'll let's not worry about that one. The other two, this is from Yarad, and this is from Shabar again. These are both cohortative cohortative volitional forms, and the way you know that is the comments hey at the end. So if it was indicative, it would be nered ve nishbar. So we will we will go down and we will buy, but because there's the cohortative indicator at the end, it'll be let us go down and let us buy for you bread. But sometimes the function of those two um, tend to overlap. So you could also just translate it as we'll go down, we'll buy. Verse 5. Ve'im lo yavo achinu lo nered ki ha'ish amar elenu lo tir'u panai ki im achichem itchem. Starting to get a little repetitive, as you can see. The same word in verse, the same words are said again here. Um, so, and if we will not go down, for the man said, so Nered here is first person plural, imperfect form of Yarad, and then Amar basic form again. Lo tir'u, we saw that form already. You will not see my face again if you don't have your brother with you. Verse 6. Vayomer Yisrael, lama achartem oti, lama tomru laish haod lachem ach. So, and Israel said, why are you achar? Let me see. Forgot what that particular word means. Trouble. So to trouble. Why are you troubling me? Why are you saying? Why are you saying to the man that we have another brother? You know. So so Jacob's saying you didn't need to tell them you had another brother. So achartem, from achar to trouble. So you have troubled. So it's the kal perfect, second person masculine plural. Tomru is the im. So this is also perfect. You said. So kal perfect, second person plural form of amar. And then verse 7. Vayamru, Sha'al ha'ish lanu lemor, ha'od avichem chai, hayesh lachem ach, ve nedaber lo al pi hadvarim ha'ele echa nedaki yomar shuvu mitzrayma et achichem. And they said, so this is the plural version of Vayomer. Sha'al ha'ish, Sha'al is the basic form of to ask. Lemor, saw that already. So the man asked us, saying, is your father still alive? And do you have a brother? And we said to him. So this is the first person plural PL form of the word diber, to say. And then from the mouth, according to these words, how do we know? Hold on. Um, how were we supposed to know that he would say, "Return to Egypt with your brother"? So they weren't expecting this demand, in other words. Soneda, from yada. This is the call imperfect, first person plural. Um, how would we know? Um, so Yomar, this is the this is the what you call it, first person singular of Amar. The first person, sorry, third person singular rather, the call perfect, and then Shuvu. This is the um, this is the imperative plural form of shuv, return. So how are we supposed to know that the man was going to tell us to come back with our brother? In other words, verse 8, Vayomer Yehuda el Yisrael, Aviv shilcha hanaar iti ve nakuma vanelecha vaniche velo namut gam anachnu gam ata gam tapenu. And Judah said, so Vayomer once again, and Judah said to Israel, his father, or their father, uh, Shilcha Hanar, um, um, it's like the brother. So send the boy with me. Uh, so this is from Shalach. Um, so this is being used. This is one of the alternate forms of the imperative. Send the young lad with me, and we you let us. So these are cohortatives, um, and we will go, and we will stand, we will rise, and we will walk, and we will live. So these two are cohortatives. You can tell from the comments "hey" at the end, and this is just a plain call imperfect. Um, all in the first person plural. And then, and we will not die. Once again, um, call imperfect first person plural. Also, both we and you, as well as and tapenu. So don't recognize that form. Let's just skip over that. Verse 9. Anochi erov oto miyadi tivakesh oto im lo yavo elecha ve'amad lefanecha ve'chatati lecha kol hayamim. So I, um, so erov. So this is a first person singular, um, call imperfect form of arav, which means, let's look back at the yeah, mix. So pledge or to mix. So I am pledging him from my hand. Um, so to seek, and you will seek him. Vakash means to seek. This is the second person singular. Call, so the call perfect, second person singular. And then if he does not come to you and stand before you, and I have sinned to you all of the days. Um, so Yavo, third person, call perfect, third person, sorry, call imperfect third person singular from vo, he will go, and this is the call perfect of Ahmad, and then this is the call perfect first person singular of Khata, to sin. So and I have sinned. Um, Actually, I think these are Vikatal forms. I misread them. So Vikatal, and I will stand before you, and I will have sinned to you all of my days. And then verse 10, Ve'ata shilcha otanu ki ata shavnu ze pa'amayim. And now send with us, for now we return these two times. So shilcha, once again, we saw that already, send. And shavnu is the first Kal perfect, first person plural form of shuv, to return. And then verse 11, Vayomer alehem Yisrael avihem zot asu kachu mitovot haaretz biklechem uvo'o. And he said to them, so Vayomer, um, Israel their father said to them, if thus, um, where, this, they did, so do take, um, from the good of the land in your vessels, and go to the man, um, with the mincha. Mincha is sort of like an offering, with a little offering. Tsari u'me'at davash nachosh velot bat nim ushkedim. So these are some unusual words. So a little bit of balm, and a little bit of honey, and a little bit of spices, and myrrh, and nuts, and no, not that one, and almonds, shaked. So Jacob is basically giving the sons a bunch of offerings to give to the man in Egypt to appease his wrath. And then verse 12, V'chesev mishne kchu biyedchem et ve'et hachesef asher bepi sakechem tikhu biyedchem. And silver, mishne, um, from the shne, blanking on how to translate that word. So take, this is the imperative form of lakach. Uh, Notice that when it turns into an imperative, the lamed of lakach drops out, so it just becomes kach, kahu. Take in your hand the silver, which is in the mouth of your sack. So remember, they found money in their sack. Uh, you will take in your hand. Tikhu. This is call imperfect, second person plural of lakach. Once again, the lamed drops out. Verse 13. Vet achichem kahu vakuhu shuvu el haish. And your brother um, taking, you shall take, yeah, and return to the man. So take your brother and return to the man. So this is actually, so this is the imperative form of lakach again. And then this is, sorry, it's kahu vakumu. So these are both these are all imperatives. So it's three imperatives, one after another, in the plural form. Take and rise and return to the man. Verse 14, Ve'el Shaddai yiten lachem rachamim lifnei ha'ish v'yiten lachem et achichem acher ve'et binyamin. Ve'ani ka'asher shacholti shakalti. So And El Shaddai, so God Almighty, will give, may He give. So this is being used in a adjussive sense. Sometimes the adjussive and the indicative, it's not always easy to tell which is being used. So here you can understand it either way. It could be either an El Shaddai will give or may El Shaddai give. Um, Either way fits with the context. Don't worry too much about which one to use. So we'll just stick to the indicative for simplicity's sake. And El Shaddai, or God Almighty, will give you mercy before the man, and he will give to you your brother, your other brother, and also Benjamin. So here is where you know it's because of the ambiguity. You can either understand this as Jacob expressing his certainty that God is going to have mercy on them. If you take these as indicatives, that's what this means. On the other hand, if you take these to be jussives, it could be that Jacob is hoping that perhaps God will show mercy and let things turn out well. Um, so either one fits in this context. Ve'ani ka'asher shacholti shachalti, and I, just as. Um, so shachal here means to be bereaved. Um, so here, let me see. How do we translate this one? Um, so I'll be bereaved. So it's basically Jacob saying that he'll not be bereaved again, or he'll be bereaved if he loses Benjamin as well. Um, so verse 15, ויקחו האנשים את המנחה הזאת משני כסף, לקחו בידם ואת בנימין, ויקומו וירדו מצרים ויעמדו לפני יוסף. And they took, so from lakach, the vital form of lakach, and the men took this offering, and the mishne kesef, like the silver. They took this. They took it as well, lakhu from lakach, in their hand, and Benjamin, and they arose and they went down. These are both vital forms of lakach and yarad. They arose and went down to Egypt, and they stood. This is the vital form of amad. These are all plurals, by the way. They stood before Joseph. They don't know it's Joseph, but we do. Vayar Yosef itam et Binyamin vayomer la'asher al betol shlach et ha'anashim habaita va'ase ochelki iti yuchlu ha'anashim ba Saharaim. So Shoharaim. Just to make things go faster, we'll skip the parsing of the verbs. In any case, you should know the verbs well enough that you should be able to do it on your own. And Joseph saw them and Benjamin, and he said, Asher al his, it's like to which upon his house send the men home and make food. Send the men to the house and then make food. For with they will eat with me, the men in the afternoon. So Harai means afternoon, or noon rather. Verse 17, Vayas ha'ish ka'asher amar Yosef vayavo'u ha'ish ve'ha'achim be'ta Yosef. And they did, and the man did just as he said, just as Joseph said, and they the man went, and the brothers went housewards to the house of Joseph. Um, so they went to Joseph's house. Um, verse 18, Vayir u ha'anashim ki ba'u bet Yosef, vayomru al dvar hakesef asher v'sakenu bat batchila ba'nu beto v'ata yikach otanu la'avadim ve'et hamorenu. And the men saw that um, they went to the house of Joseph, and they said, upon the word of, on account of the money which was in their sack, so they spoke about it um, in the Tehillah, Ba'nu. In the Tehillah, forgot what that word means. In the beginning, um, so let me see. In the beginning, um, sorry, here. In the beginning, we went to his house, and now he took with us to the servants, um, as servants, and our donkeys. Um, so, yeah. And then verse 19, Vayamru el ha'ish asher al bet Yosef, Vayidabru elav betach habayit. And they said to the man who was upon the house of Joseph, and they spoke to him at the entrance of the house. Verse 20, Vemru bi Adoni Vayaradnu Bathila Vanishbor Ochel. And they said to me, they said, please, so B means please here, please, my Lord, um, uh, Yaradnu, we will go down in the beginning, and we will buy bread. Verse 21, Vahi ki va'nu el hamaloch, vaniftecha el sakenu, vahine kesef ish bepi sako, kaspenu, be mi mishkalo hinehu biyadenu. They're explaining the situation, how they ended up with the money. And so it was, just as we were going to the place of lodging, and we opened our sacks, and behold, the money of the man, the money of each man, was upon the mouth of the sack, our money, or our silver, in its weight, and behold, it was in his hand. It was in our hand, rather. They were surprised to find the money in their bags, and now they're bringing it back. Verse 22, V'kesef acher b'yadenu ve'ata nishbara ochel lo yadanu misham kaspenu b'shakenu. And the other silver in our hand, and now is in our hand rather, and now let us buy food. We do not know who placed our money in our sacks. And then verse 23, Vayomer Shalom lachem al tira'u Elohechem ve'Elohe avichem natan lachem kesef Besakechem Kaspechem Ba Eli Vayetze Alehem Shimon. So here's Joseph speaking to his brothers, and he said, "Peace to you. Do not be afraid. Al tira'u." This is an imperative. Your God and the God of your fathers has given to you money in your sacks. Um, in sacks, your silver um, come to your silver has come to me. So he's saying, I still have your money. Um, and went and they went out to them, Simon, and then Simon came out to them. Remember, Simon was being kept in custody. Now here he is. Sorry, Simon, Simeon, same thing. Verse 24. ויבואו האיש והאחים ביתה יוסף ויתן מים וירחצו רגליהם ויתן מספו. And the man and brothers went to the house of Joseph, and he gave water and washed their feet. And he gave mispo, which means fodder. So he gave them some livestock. He gave them fodders, like food for their donkeys, rather. Donkey feed. Verse 25. וישימו את המנחה בבית כי שם יאכלו להם. And he placed the offering of the house, for they heard that he placed, and they ate. For there they ate bread, lachem. Verse 27. ויבוא יוסף הביתה ויתנו לו את המנחה אשר בידם בבית. And Joseph went to the house and gave to him the offering. And they gave Joseph the offering, which was in their hand, in the house. Verse 27. וישאר להם, ישאל להם לשלום, ויאמר השלום אביכם הזכון אשר אמרתם עודנו חי. So Joseph's asking about his dad. We don't know his dad, and he asked them to peacefully. He asked, and he said, "Is the peace of your father, your old father, which you spoke about, still alive? So is your father well? Is he still alive?" He's asking them. And verse 28, V'yamru shalom la'avdecha la'avinu odenu chai. And they said, our father, peace is upon your servant, our father. He's well. Odenu chai, he is still alive. So we don't have too many verses left. We should be able to speed run this, Lord willing. Verse 29, Vayisa enav vayar et Binyamin achiv ben imo vayomer haze achichem hakaton asher amartem elai vayomer yehi Elohim itcha bni. And he lifted up his eyes, common Hebrew expression there, and he saw Benjamin. Joseph seeing Benjamin again for the first time in a long while. Benjamin, his brother, the son of his mother, Rachel, in other words. And this one said, he said, "Is this your brother, your youngest brother, which you spoke to me about. And um, and he said, Yahi Elohim, um, and he said, um, uh, as the Lord is with you, my son. So it's a term of blessing there. Verse 30. Vayetze Yosef ki rabim rachamav el achiv vayetze mipnehem vayevk. And Joseph went out for many mercies to his brother. Um, so not sure how to render that idiomatically. And he went out from before them and he wept. So Joseph has a cry moment, but he doesn't want his brothers to see it. This is from Baka, by the way, to weep. And then verse 31, Vayirchatz panav vayetze vayomer simu lahem. And he washed their faces. He washed his face to get the tears out, and he went out and he said, "Place bread." Okay, just a little bit more, 3 more verses. Verse 32, "Vayasimulo levado lahem levadam ve la mitzrayim ito levadam kilo yochlu hamitzrayim et ha'ivrim lechem ki toevahi lemitzrayim." And they placed for him only and bread, and for them only, and to the Egyptians with him only, for the Egyptians do not eat with the Hebrews. So just a little note. So this is usually a definite direct object marker at, but sometimes it's used with the connotation with. Here is one place where at means with. So the Egyptians do not eat with Hebrews. You kind of have to translate it that way, because otherwise you would be forced to translate this: the Egyptians do not eat Hebrews, which is kind of awkward and weird. So the Egyptians do not eat with the Hebrews bread, for it is an abomination to the Egyptians. So toeva, it's a common Hebrew word meaning abomination. You see it a lot in Leviticus. Here you see that it appears in Genesis as well. The Hebrews are toeva to the Egyptians. Verse 33, Vayeshvu lefanav ha-bechor ki bechorato ve hatzair ki tzairato ve yitmachu ha'anashim ish el re'ehu. And they sat before Habachor ki bechoratav. Let me see. Bechor is the firstborn. So they sat before him, firstborn, just as bechorato. So this is a little hard to translate. Just as its firstborn, and the youngest, just as his youngest, and they hastened, and the men hastened, each to his brother. not Vayit Vayit Mahu. Um, so this is a very yeah. Okay. So this explains it. So they each man was seated according to his status as firstborn or youngest, um, and they were facing one another, each to his neighbor. Um, and then finally, we'll look at verse 37. Vaisa lechem me'et panav lehem vaiten lahem rav lebin yamin milechem kulam chamesh yadot um, vayishtu vayish vayishkru imo. And they lifted up bread. Um, so he lifted up bread from before him to them, and he gave bread. He gave much bread to Benjamin. So Benjamin gets extra bread from all of their bread. 5 yadot. Sounds like, five, sort of like 5 portions. And they drank. Um, and they so they drank and they got drunk with him. So shahar, it's a verb which means basically it means to be drunk. Yeah. If you're familiar with the Joseph story, now you get a taste of what it sounds like in the Hebrew. Um, so the Joseph story, just so you know, will continue up until chapter 23 of the workbook, where you get to the end of the Joseph story. And then after that, we also cover Ruth and Jonah. Hopefully that has been helpful to you to give you an idea of how to translate. So next lesson, chapter 17, will be called Verb consecutives. We've already covered verb consecutives, or the Vaiktol and Vakatal form, but here we'll go into more detail about um, what that is about, God willing. And there we go.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Lewis. I think there was one question in the chat a while back.
Yeah, I can see it. You want me to take that really quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I'm looking. The question is about Deuteronomy 14, verse 26. Let me reopen my verbum. The question is about Deuteronomy 14:26. Spending money on what you desire. Say the first verb desire, second is more intense craving. Um, so let's look at that verse. Um, ונתת הכסף בכל אשר תאווה נפשך. So spend money for what you desire. Yeah, so here we have the word desire. So let's look at what it says in the Brown Driver Briggs. So let me see. What is the So it does have that connotation of something that what you like. In other words, um, you can see that it's used in a variety of contexts. Um, so a person who is very thirsty has a ava for water, desiring of beauty of a princess. So it has a number of connotations. Now let me take a look at the Lexham word, the theological word book of the Old Testament, which is quite useful for more in-depth explanations of specific Hebrew words as well as their connotations. So ava, um, that would be aleph, vav, um, aleph, vav, hey. Um, oh, actually, we're already there. Um, so according So it generally it just means desire. It could mean something stronger than that, like desire, pleasant lust, greed, dainty, desirable. Now, in Deuteronomy, ta'aveh, so it actually is using this specific form right here. Um, it's not speaking to the specific use in Deuteronomy, but this would be the general connotation that it's going for. This noun has the meaning of desire extending to both good and bad objects. Um, does that answer the question of the questioner about the meaning of the word? I think it does.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Well, hopefully the that will help to enlighten the connotations of the word as it appears in Deuteronomy 14:26.
Good. I appreciate you doing this, Lewis. I'm looking forward to the next one. We'll get it on the calendar here in probably another couple weeks. So we'll end up doing these a little bit more frequently. The Hebrew series.
Sure. Yeah.
Y'all look for a link coming soon. But once again, thank you so much for coming on and doing this, Lewis.
It's my pleasure.
And everybody, thank y'all for watching. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. That's gonna do it. See you later. God bless.